G'day, Us. Welcome back.
Us,
Good to see you, Mitch.
You too.
This week we're going to continue on with our series, if you like. A couple of weeks ago we addressed looking at the role that strength training plays in your martial arts, and we discussed some of the fundamental principles, but we didn't actually get very specific.
No.
So today we're going to get kind of specific, look at some possible more detailed ideas of how to use strength training in your actual training. So, of course, Mitch is the expert here, not me, that's for sure. But I'll take it away from there. Us, Rochelle, good to see you. Gustav, namaste, thanks for coming. Us. So, we have different types of physical training. Remember, Shin, Gi, Tai. Shin, the mind training. You remember, fighting is 90% in the mind. So to actually apply the techniques that we work on in the dojo takes tremendous willpower when the opponent is deliberately trying to hurt you. Okay, so making things work under pressure against an opponent is a different story. That's the mental side of it. The Gi, or the technique side, is you need the good technique to make it work as well. And Tai, the physical conditioning, is composed of 5 components, as we know: the 4 primary somatics: speed, strength, cardiovascular endurance, flexibility, and the 5th one, which we require for impact sports such as full contact karate, is what I call sturdiness, or the body's ability to take punishment. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yeah.
So today, we spoke about, last time we spoke about the whole thing of strength and conditioning almost being a bit of a misnomer.
I think it is. Yeah.
And it got its name in a very roundabout way. Did you want to remind us of how?
Sure. So this is what I learned from Ian King, that in 1970, I think it was 1978, the coaches in North America at the universities formed an organization, and they called it the NSCA, the National Strength Coaches Association. That was the acronym for it. And then about 3 or 4 years later, I think it was 1982, their role had expanded a little bit. They were working with the football players in the gym, but they were also doing some stuff on the field, probably some speed training, some flexibility training, some endurance training, and so on. And so they wanted to, strength coaching wasn't a broad enough topic for what they were offering the athletes in terms of services, but they didn't want to change the acronym of the organization. So they called it Strength and Conditioning. So the National Strength and Conditioning Association. So strength went first, like as a primary physical quality, if you're to interpret it literally, and then everything else, flexibility, speed, strength, endurance, and so on, was just packaged in conditioning. It was there. So it's like strength first, then conditioning. And that's
misleading.
It's incredibly misleading. But unfortunately, the world's taken it on and thinks I'm very pro strength, definitely, in training, but that quality is no more important than any other qualities, depending on the athlete in front of you.
Fair enough. So what we're going to do today, a couple of weeks ago when we addressed it, we went through some fundamentals, the different approaches to the different somatics. But today, I think Mitch will probably look at
just a little bit deep, some practical things that you can add to your training if you see fit. And when I say this, the ultimate thing is to get an individualized training program. It's the bee's knees. It's what should be done. So to give broad general advice to a lot of people,
I would add that you need to get that program from someone who knows what they're talking about.
Definitely.
Because at the end of the day, honestly, it's the 80-20 rule in advance. 80% of the people out there give you next to nothing. And so you've got to find the 20% of strength and conditioning coaches who really know their stuff.
Definitely. And so I'll just give you a couple of concepts that you can apply to your training if you're not already. And the first one is, starting broad and working in, this is what's on top of your martial arts training. So if you do go to the gym, so to speak, or do anything outside of your martial arts training to improve it, what I would call physical preparation, is there is no strength training without adding flexibility training as well. So by and large, people are doing themselves an enormous disservice. Long-term, not short-term. Short-term, you're going to get buff, you're going to get strong, you're going to feel fantastic. Long-term, you're doing yourself an enormous disservice if you're not adding flexibility training to your strength training. So let's say you go to the dojo and you train, say, 5 hours a week, just as an example. And then you go to the gym, say 3 days a week, and train. Each session's about an hour in strength training. So you've added 3 extra hours of strength training activity that is tension producing. It's adding to the tightness and minimizing the joint gap and so on. So what you want to do there is you want to do things to reverse that, and flexibility is something that reverses that. So if you're going to add strength training, I'm not going to tell, I mean, a 1-to-1 ratio is ideal. And as we get older, we need to do more stretching compared to strength training. But as a general rule, just very simply to our broad audience, if you're adding strength training, you want to add flexibility work as well. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't do that long term.
I would also add, just a thought off the top of my head, that when you're young and fit and fast and furious and you're fighting tournaments, you need to really, really train hard. And there is no doubt that there are certain times, for example, in a tournament when you get a bad injury, but you want to fight on anyway, because you have to overcome that. The problem becomes when you don't know what to do after you retire. How can I make changes to my training program that no longer needs to optimize my output for a tournament? In fact, what happens is your training should optimize your output for general day-to-day training.
And longevity.
And longevity is the most important thing. And this is why, with all due respect to everyone involved, I find it amusing when you see guys in their 30s and 40s talking about what you can do for longevity. I mean, at 45 years old, you're not even in the midlife yet, so you have no authority to be telling people what they should be doing in terms of training, unless it's very, very good. What I'm getting at is I see too many guys online who are recommending people do what they're doing for longevity, when the reality is their genetics and their physical output at that time is way beyond what it'll ever be down the track. So I always think it'd be fun to see what happens to those people in 30 years' time. Are they even training still? This is the thing that I find is, as you know, you would have seen it too, quite often the air gets rare up the top, and over time, out of 100 people that you probably knew you trained with in your 30s, maybe 1 or 2 or 5 are still training in their 60s. So I think another aspect of training that is very important is the longevity, the nature of the training that allows it to be applied over a long period of time.
I love how you said that, Xian. And flexibility and tension reduction type work is exactly that. I mean, you talk so much about the spine being the key to long-term health and mobility. And when we train in the dojo, Xian, you're in your mid to late 60s, and you're one of the most flexible people in the dojo. And it shouldn't be the way. I mean, the younger people in theory should be even more flexible, but we're not, because we have a generation of people who have been led down a garden path to emphasize things that you can see in the absence of things that you can't see.
I turn 67 my next birthday, and I don't feel a day over 66. But anyway.
That's funny. Yeah. So that's the first one. That's the first thing. There is no additional strength training without additional flexibility training in my world. In your world, if that's what you're doing, at some point you're going to realize what I said and need to take that on. So, and it's easier to, something Ian always says, it's easier to choose to change than be forced to change. Choosing to change is a lot easier than being forced to change.
That's right. Being able to say, I choose to do it is far different to saying I have to do it.
Yeah,
definitely.
Now, the second thing is a line of movement concept that I just want to briefly introduce you to. And again, this is an Ian King concept that he developed, 30, 40 years ago. And basically there's different lines of movement. I'm just going to keep it to the upper body to keep it really simple. And I'll give you a specific reason why. We have in the horizontal plane of movement, we have horizontal pushing exercises, which is like a bench press or a dumbbell press. We have horizontal pulling exercises, which is like a bent over row, one arm dumbbell row, or a seated row. Then we have in the vertical plane, we've got a vertical pushing exercise, which is like a shoulder press or a military press. And then we've got a vertical pulling exercise, which is like a chin up or a lat pull down. And these lines of movement are really important because when you look at, I'm going to use Kyokushin karate as the main example of this, our fundamental conditioning drills are push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. right? So the push-up is a horizontal pushing movement, right? And the squat is I've got to go lower body because I'm talking about the squat. So in the lower body, we also have a quad dominant movement. So it uses the quads more, the front of the legs. And then we have hip dominant movement that uses a posterior chain more, the glutes, hamstrings, and lower back. And the squatting is a very quad dominant movement, as are all the low stances in Kyokushin as well. So in our strength training, what in the ideal world that Xian talked about for longevity, being able to train long-term, keeping the body straight and square, we don't want to go and refocus on those movements that we're already done so much of and are doing so much of. We actually want to do the reverse, to keep the joint healthy, to keep joints in place, to keep the nerves from being irritated so they can continue to fire and express themselves well.
And to balance the body in terms of longevity. The thing that you see when people get old is they lose their postural integrity. And that in athletes, what you see is the imbalance as a result of the specific type of training they did.
Yeah.
So, for example, we know how incredibly, pound for pound, how incredibly strong gymnasts are. But quite often you'll see them when they get old, they get this rolling forward of the shoulder because everything is shortened here.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's what we're ensuring against in good quality strength training, good quality physical preparation training. So when you go to the gym, as a general rule, to reverse all the push-ups that you're doing, you don't jump on the bench press and get stronger at that at first. What you do is you balance the body up. You focus on seated rows. You focus on one-arm dumbbell rows. Any horizontal pulling type movement that pulls a scapula and retracts the shoulders and opens the chest up. That becomes a priority in your strength training. So you don't follow traditional hypertrophy or strength training guidelines with bench press first in the week and first in the session, and then incline press and then dips. All that's going to do is continue to give you an imbalance that you're already developing in your martial arts training. We do the opposite first for the upper body. And then for the lower body, we're not going to go and jump in the squat rank and bust out heaps of squats. Instead, my preference is deadlifting. I'd rather see traditional bent knee deadlift. Now, you want to get some coaching and guidance on that, ideally, because the deadlift done wrong can be a problem. But if you know what you're doing in it, it's just an incredible exercise. And then the deadlift is a foundation for the base of the Olympic lifts, which I love, which are the snatch, the power clean, the clean pull, the snatch pull, all these exercises where we're pulling the bar up from the floor, basically engaging our posterior chain, engaging our hamstrings, our glutes, our lower back, our erector spinae, our upper traps, and our scapular retractors that give us this pull back and big butt, basically, type shape to our bodies. That's, in my view, should be the priority of strength training for the majority, not for everyone, because there's always differences, but if we're talking about the 80-20 rule, that's where we need to be going in our strength training.
Correct breathing also helps to maximize your power. That's true. I mean, without the breath, your body dies. You can live without food for a few weeks. You can live without water for a few days, and you can live without breath for a few minutes. So you need to breathe. And it's true. We've had fighters in the past who in the dojo were technically brilliant. When they get into a tournament, they get overwhelmed by the moment and they forget to breathe. And so they'd run out of steam very quickly. That's a very important point.
And just on that, Xian, as well, in strength training, there's a thing called the Valsalva maneuver, which is exactly that. It's bracing the abdominal cavity and holding breath when you're under pressure to increase intra-abdominal pressure so the back stays straight so you can power out of challenging positions in your exercise.
So that Valsalva maneuver is a perfect example of how coordinating the breath actually does make the body stronger.
Yes.
And in Kyokushin, we have three main breathing techniques, all from yoga, by the way. First of all, we have the Ibuki breath, and then we have the Nogare 1 and Nogare 2. And it's interesting. The Nogare 1 and Nogare 2 are essentially opposites. One has a long breath in, a short breath out. That energizes. Long breath. And you do that, you'll see weightlifters doing it.
Yes.
You're 100%. You see them in the Olympics. And then like this. That energizes. The flip side is short breath in, long breath out. That relaxes you. That calms you down. So we can use these breathing techniques, for example, in between fights at a tournament, or even when you're trying to recover between rounds in training. is very valuable. So that's a good point there.
Yeah, and one engages the short one, the one energizes, I believe engages a sympathetic nervous system for all the book nerds out there, and the other one engages a parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxing system of their body. So we're actually manipulating our nervous system when we're doing that as well, which is what we should be doing in training, manipulating as many systems of the body as we can to our advantage.
And also, interesting that you mentioned that without being judgmental and disrespectful, many athletes, including fighters, after they finish their professional competitive careers, they become overweight. That's a perfect example of not knowing how to transition from one particular style of training to another style that is appropriate to where you are in your life. I think that's very, very important.
Absolutely. So we've gone through the no additional strength training without additional flexibility training. They're like yin and yang. They need to be done together. We've also been through the lines of movement, the different lines of movement, and we've got a couple of exercises to reverse the stimulus we get from most of our martial arts training to square the body up, keep it firing well, keep the balance in the joints so that we're healthy long term. Sorry, you got to go, Shao?
No, finish.
The final thing I want to discuss is muscle contraction types, because people get confused about this too in the martial arts. And I'll use the bench press, and the bench press is a fantastic exercise. However, the rate of force development of a bench press compared to, say, a punch, and the sequence of muscle contraction of a bench press compared to a punch are like chalk and cheese. Yeah. They're so different. And there's this simple mentality that someone's got a big bench press, they're going to have a big punch. Maybe, maybe not. So I'll go through it very quickly. The rate of force development is the force over time that your muscle and your body is putting out. Yeah. So when you're bench pressing, the highest force output is usually coming off the bottom to the midpoint. And then once your elbows, if I'm here, once my elbows start to extend out a little bit straighter, the bar speed slows down, generally speaking, which is not what happens in a punch at all. What happens in a punch, we start here and we're going faster as we go. We don't slow the punch down as we get there.
Ideally, we're accelerating through the target, not decelerating.
So it's completely different. A bench press is completely different. And then on top of that, if we look at the sequence of muscle contraction for a punch as well, typically you're going to be standing here, you're going to be isometric, and it's going to be a concentric activity. It's going to be a muscle shortening activity. The anterior delts are going to shorten, the triceps are going to shorten for the punch to go out. If you look at the sequence of contraction in a bench press, we're having an eccentric, a lengthening of the muscles, an isometric pause at the bottom ideally, or a very short pause to engage a stretch shortening cycle to push up, to shorten. But we're not doing that in the bench press, in a punch. So the specificity and the transfer from the gym to a punch is more limited than you think. Now, does that mean you should throw bench press out? Absolutely not. But its role...
understand its role.
Yeah, its role in punching training is a lot more limited than you think.
Now, Mark says something. Should your flexibility training sessions be separate from strength training sessions? You could even add, should it be before or after, or before and after? I guess I'm asking, what space of time should you have between them? Good question.
Such good questions. Is that Mark?
Mark Nakora.
Mark, such great question. So 2 answers for you. In the ideal world, everyone should, and I don't like to say should because it's kind of inferring, it's trying to guilt people into things, but ideally people do individualized flexibility training sessions without doubt. So to me, flexibility is a physical quality that deserves the same respect and same focus and intention that strength training gets, that speed training gets, that endurance training gets, or fitness training. So why wouldn't flexibility get its own as well, right? So you're absolutely onto something. You should have a couple of sessions a week that are dedicated to flexibility training alone. Then next question, what was it?
In relation
before or after?
Between, is it before, is it after?
Yeah, so that can be its own session, and I don't care when that happens, just so long as that happens. You're building time in that quality, which you're going to get so much benefit for. It's a very good thing. In terms of before or after, there's a trend in the world at the moment that you do dynamic stretching before and static stretching after. I'm generally not a fan of that. I go against that. My preference is a priority principle. Whatever you need to do most should get done first in training. And if I look at most dojos, most gyms around the world, and I compare people's strength versus I compare their levels of flexibility, their flexibility is going to be lacking compared to their strength. So that should be done first.
There you go. Good answer. Remember that which you need most gets done first. That's a principle you should always keep in your mind. And it's actually a lot deeper than you think, because quite often what we need most is the thing we deliberately ignore.
Yeah, and don't want to do because we're
That's
not as
right.
good at.
Because we're not as good at it. We're a little shy in front of people. But the reality is the thing you need to do most should be done first. There's no doubt about it. Roland from West Aussie. How are you, Roland? I focus more on mobility training now to optimize, maintain the flexibility and strength I have attained over the years. Roland's also, if I recall, probably in his early 60s. This helps me manage my joint health and hence movement issues.
And Roland, that's so fantastic that you do that. And this is exactly what Xian was saying earlier. If you are in your 60s now, you understand maintaining joint health. A lot of younger people don't understand joint. And when I say younger, I'm talking under 30, even 35 years old, sometimes up to 40 if they haven't trained much. People will come in and they're just like, haven't got a long training history. Their joints are, what do you mean joint health? But joints wear over the time if we don't look after them. And doing flexibility work opens and maintains a healthy joint gap, the space between bones. And again, like Ian always says, it's better to choose to change and be forced to change. So you're doing a great thing, Roland.
Us, Vassos, greetings from Cyprus. Us, on holidays. Rebreathing, what are your views on the OxyBio devices that I see being advertising? Well, I think if I can step in before Mitch blasts it, maybe he won't. But I tend to think we need to remember that the fitness industry is an industry and it's designed to separate money from people. So every 6 months, you'll see something new come along that's brand spanking new and is the greatest thing that the human world has ever seen. And no one can explain why. No one ever worked it out before this. But here it is. Get yours now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, entirely.
So I think these devices that deprive you of oxygen and so on, my thought, I could be wrong. I was wrong once before, but I could be wrong in that the only way you get it's kind of designed to simulate altitude training. The only way you get long-term benefit from altitude training is when you're in that altitude for long enough so that the blood can compensate with hemoglobin building.
Yeah, and more EPO is produced.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you just put it on and take it off, there's always benefit, but the only benefit I really see is the mental benefit, is the ability to develop your willingness and resilience to keep going under mental pressure when the body wants to give up. And like Dan Gable says, the body can give up, but if the mind is strong, you'll keep going. But once the mind gives up, then it's all over, Red Rover.
I've just got a story for you guys on that. Many years ago, I was at a rugby league training camp with a team, and the head coach wanted them to put on those masks, right, that you're talking about, and play like that, like doing a pose session as one of the training drills. And I wasn't really for it because they don't breathe well, they can't see well, and so on. But anyway, head coach is a head coach in that respect. And one very good player, contracted to NRL, didn't see a ditch in the field, put his foot in the ditch, did his ACL, changed his career. So there's always second order effects from the decisions that we make. And I learned a massive lesson from that. There's no breathing thing, anything that's worth an athlete in a dynamic moving sport not being able to see properly, and having good control of their body. So,
yep. And those masks will limit your vision. And when you're talking, if you're sparring with it or anything, and vision is split second important, anything can happen there. I do try to exhale when I get hit in sparring. Good. But I don't have the muscle memory yet. Too few sparring sessions from me. Still early days. Look, I think it's a good idea. And if you want to talk about a path forward, that's why it's also I always encourage people to ki strongly in kumite, because quite often you get hit as a counter to your own shot. And if you're soft, that's when you're going to get hurt. But if you ki strongly when you throw the technique, that can serve as a form of armor, I think. But the other thing too, in that respect, is to work your body conditioning drills. I think it's very important to work your two-man body conditioning drills so that even when you get hit and you're not 100% on it, your body still has the ability to take a little more punishment than it would otherwise. So keep it up. The use of accommodating resistance on the compound movements is a great way to create that force.
Yeah, there's different devices, accommodating resistance devices, that they're different cams and my hands there, different shafts and cams. So when you go through a range of motion, say it's a bicep curl or a bench press, it makes the sticking point easier, and it makes the other ranges towards the end a little bit harder. So there's a constant force on the joints as you move through it,
rather than get that bell
curve. Yeah. Now, from an actual training point of view of athletes against gravity, against opponents, I'm not a fan of it at all, because it's just not real. It's not reality. But from a longevity point of view, and you're out of that and you're just training to be healthy and keep the body moving and so on, I'm a big fan of it. I think there's a lot of roads lead to Rome, and if people find benefit in that, I'm all for it.
In a way, it kind of reminds me of a Smith machine, which has its benefits, but at the same time, it also robs you of many opportunities to work on your stabilizers around your core. So it's a similar sort of thing with those sort of things. Your body changes as the force changes. And if you use something that keeps it even, once again, it's an unrealistic approach to it.
Yeah, but for just general health and well-being, it's wonderful.
Yeah, good on you. Well, Frank Zane was a big proponent of stretching during the weight sessions.
There you go.
I didn't know that. He was pretty good at weights too.
Yeah, Frank Zane, a great bodybuilder from the old school.
Had either of you seen the video of Eddie Hall, Tom Aspinall, and Rico Verhoeven having a punch competition on a machine that measures the power of the punch? It was interesting to see the technique. I haven't seen it.
I haven't either, but I've seen a video of Tom Aspinall, and it might have been one of those guys doing leg kicks, or someone came to Tom Aspinall and he was doing leg kicks at certain intensities, like 40%, 50% with pads on, and they were just dropping at like 40, 50%. That's to your sturdiness. But no, I haven't seen that video.
The other thing about that sort of leg kick thing is you can be 5% wrong with the angle, and your ability to withstand the impact drops by 200%.
Yes.
So I think another thing is the technical proficiency of the skill, and this is why you can't separate body conditioning from technical proficiency in an event such as a tournament fight, because you can be the fittest guy in the tournament, but if your defense shapes are wrong, it's all over.
Yes.
And the flip side is also true. You can be really, really good defensively, but if you don't have your body conditioned well, it's not really going to help that much.
Yes.
So
they're the main concepts I wanted to go through in a generalized sit-down talk. So there's been no strength training without stretching. That's number one. Add that if you're not already doing it. And I know I'm talking to gifted people who martial artists traditionally do stretch a lot more. The resistance to stretching is a lot less in the martial arts cohort. So I think that's a great thing. Number two is Ian's line of movements concept, really important to understand. And then point three, do reverse what you're doing in training most of the time in the gym. Give the things in the gym the priority of what you're doing less of in the dojo over all the years. And then point four is the types of muscle contraction and the rate of force development. And this is where things such as medicine balls and slam balls and clap push-ups and jump squats and bounding exercises.
All those explosive plyometric
that's so wonderful. And they're so underdone because you're not holding a big weight or anything like that. But they transfer beautifully to the martial arts, to force development, to rate of force development, to power output.
If I can add one other thing too, in terms of the Kihon, Oishi Hanshi, Oishi Daigo from the early tournament days, points out that if the basics are done well, you actually stretch every muscle in the body from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet, and there's no doubt about it. And one thing is, when you retract that hikite, Sosai was adamant about retracting the elbow towards the spine. So what you have is a scapular retraction whilst you're also having an extension the other side. So if you do the technique correctly, you actually address those lines of movement problems in a much greater level than you would think. If you're not retracting properly, you get an overwhelming imbalance of the technique going forward. But if you're retracting correctly, every single technique you do is a countermeasure against those imbalances in the lines of movement.
And I'll just add to that, Shian, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember from my early Shotokan days when we did the Hikate, it was actually down towards the hip more.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm picking up in video. Whereas when I came over to Kyokushin, it was up a lot higher. And interestingly, and I think we've spoken about this once or twice before, the scapular retraction that happens when the fist is lower on the hip is much less than when it's higher and wound up.
Yes.
Than when it's higher and wound up here and pulled back. So the scapular retractors work a lot harder and a lot more forcefully when what's also bringing the hand up.
Yes.
That's just from a physiological point of view.
Yes. And I think also, it's one thing to have a nice relaxed hand. I mean, I've done it myself, but you'll find when you throw that punch to get the tendon reflex, you can't do it from there. There is no tendon reflex. So what you'll tend to do is lift it and drive it like that.
To get the stretch shortening cycling.
And the other thing too is when you do the uchuke breakout and so on, it's a scapular retraction movement. So it's also, I talked about the 3 points of kata training. Waza no kankyuki no chosei chikara no kyojaku. So the timing of technique, breath control, and the points of power stress. In Funakoshi Gichin's book, Karate do Kyohan, or the Master Text, he talks about, he replaces breath control with the expansion and contraction of the body, which is, you'll find with this movement here, when you shape up, there's a concave. At certain times, there's a retraction at the back, and that expansion and contraction of your body adds a whole new explosive stretch shorten through the entire spine of the body. So that's very important too. And the first thing you'll see when people train regularly over a long period of time incorrectly is imbalances in the posture and the body. So I think it's very important that people, when they train for long term, you must understand the correct technique, because incorrect technique will force your body into deformity, if you like.
Yeah, a shape that you don't want. And I didn't mention it, but the external rotation Xian's talking about, saying Sanshin type shapes of the body, they're emphasizing external rotation of the humerus.
Yeah.
Which you see people over time not be able to get their wrist, their inside, that's outside of their shoulder joint, because they've lost the external rotation. Something that Ian King has that I love is that you adopt the shape that you load in. So if you're not giving your body these ranges that they need, you'll eventually lose it. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. So it's really important. The rows, the external rotations, these are all so important for our body to reverse the push-ups and all the punches and everything that we do in training.
Very true. And finally, Nick Pendragon, how are you, man? The more I research, the more I'm drawn to the Bronze Age training. They were incredibly stern, drug-free, and used weights to heal the body. They all boxed, fenced, wrestled, and were acrobatic. Good point. In fact, the very first years of boxing in England, I think the first ever English championship, I think the first round was fencing.
Really?
Yep. The second round was wrestling, and the third round was boxing. So you're right there in that it's only, and we've spoken about it, the thing that separates different fighting arts is the rule set you choose to train and fight under. Originally, though, it was all one. And under pressure against someone who's trying to harm your loved ones, I guarantee that you will use anything, from a milk crate to a knife to anything necessary. So it all comes back to one. And this is why I think it's very important that we as martial artists are not ignorant of anything that's out there. If you're a Kyokushin fighter and you've never trained with a Muay Thai fighter, get out there and do it. If you're a stand-up fighter and you've never wrestled with a top-level wrestler, it's an eye-opener. Don't think that just because you know how to punch and kick, they're not going to be able to bridge the gap, because I guarantee they'll bridge the gap and you'll be on your back wondering what happened quicker than you can blink. So that's a really, it's a good point. See, the thing that Nick's point points out is, there's a lot of points there, wasn't there? Points out is they boxed, they fenced, they wrestled, they were acrobatic, they did everything, and that gave their body a natural a balance.
Yeah, great stimulus.
Good. The ancient Greeks practiced the original mixed martial art of pancration, which was balance in all aspects. There you go. And I think, and also the ancient Indians and so on, it was, only over time that people started to pick portions out of it and separate. Probably got their butt kick on the mat, so they go, well, I want to kick to stand up.
What I'm good at.
Or some guy punched him in the face and they go, I want to stick to wrestling. Anyway, so I hope you got something out of that, guys. Appreciate your presence, as always. To my Patreon family, thank you very much. Once again, your support helps us keep this channel going. If you're not a subscriber, both of you. I heard there's 2 people out there aren't a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, please do so. But also, right-click, get the URL and pass it to your friends and tell them to come along and join in the party. We appreciate everybody's input. That was really, really valuable. Some great questions there. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Us. Thanks for coming, guys.